everybody. Welcome. I'm Daniel G. Garza, and this is Putting Together Conversations. I'd like to start, as usual, thanking my producers, Mr. Kevin Moyers and Mr. Jose Reyes, for all their help and support. Also thanking my producer, Mr. Christian Paul Ramirez, for directing and helping me out here in the studio. Today, I'm always excited for my guests because I handpick my guests. Let's put it that way. And sometimes, like in this case, sometimes my guests just kind of land on my lap without even wanting. And I will tell you how we met in just a minute. I'm going to introduce him. Mr. Rohan Dixit is founder and CEO at Lief Therapeutics, a digital mental health and medical device company. He's also the founder of the Internet Party, a nonprofit that supports political revolutions through direct technology-enabled democracy. Formerly a Harvard and Stanford neuroscientist, sounds so fancy. His work has been featured on the Today Show, CNBC, The Atlantic, Rolling Stone, NBC, CBS, and Forbes magazine. Welcome to the show, Rohan Dixit. How you doing, sir?
Thanks, Daniel. It's great to be here.
When I was putting together the flyer for us, and I was like, because I know you're busy, and I was like, okay, I don't want to bug him too much. So I was trying to, as I always make the flyer, I'm like, what do I put as like the title? And then I went on your LinkedIn page and like BA in neuroscience. I was like, that's it. That's going to make me look really good that he's a neuroscientist.
Good, right?
Like your neuroscience is going to make me look really good. So let me put that on there. But welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I'll try to make you look good. I'll do my best.
For those of you always interested in how I met my, let me make sure where everything's being shared. We talked about the magic of doing live shows now on the internet. Like, there's so many details to look for. Make sure everything's like that. Like, always turn your volume on the phone down when you're doing it. For those of you that follow me and know about it, know that I became an ambassador to Lyfebulb earlier this year, and it's I'm specifically brought on for the recovery division of it. So anything that with alcohol and drug addiction, most of you know who follow the show, I have been sober 13 years now, since June 21st, from alcohol and drugs. Thank you, sir. Thank you. And Lyfebulb had a it's not really a contest. It was more of a
an event.
Yeah, a grant. There was a grant being offered, and there were several applicants, and it was down to, I believe, 16 or 17 about finalists. And Rohan was there. So I was brought on. I was not a finalist. I was not in the whole thing. But I was brought on because I'm an ambassador. I was brought on to kind of moderate and carry the conversation, which I'm not doing well right now, but carry on the conversation in one of the green rooms in the Zoom session. And this is where I met Rohan. And then, of course, being on the email list, I got the notice that Rohan and his company had won. So congratulations on that. And we'll talk more about that in just a second. So that's how we connected. And as soon as I got the email, I was like, I need to have this guy on my show. I need to find out. And he was so kind. He was on the road when we were talking. And I think that's why he agreed, because he was on the road and had to pay attention to the driving. So he just said to me to get me off the phone, right? That was it.
No, I'm really stoked to be here. Thanks, Daniel, for inviting me on. And yeah, I'm so glad we met at that contest. It was a great event, and for a good cause, and so many amazing companies and amazing people there, really doing a lot in the addiction space.
So for those of you who are interested in the recovery field, I have made contact with some of the other applicants. There's a word I was looking for, but the other applicants to the grant, and we'll be having more shows on recovery. I think if we're going to just this last 6-7 months of lockdown, it has been it hit really hard for a lot of people in recovery. people who were sober for a long time, lost their sobriety, or people who never considered themselves alcoholics or addicts, came to that realization because of the lockdown. And then people who really don't have a problem, but developed a problem with drinking over the holidays. And that was such an interesting concept because it blew my mind on some of the new things that I learned in this conversation. And we'll get all into all that in a minute. But let's start with you, Rohan. I'm just going to start because I feel like we have a whole lot of conversation. I was going to do a lot of chit chat, but I don't want to do chit chat. Rohan, Dixit, tell us how you put it together.
Yeah, I mean, happy to just have a conversation too. I mean, Daniel, it was so great meeting you, like I said, at that Lyfebulb event about all these different approaches, these new tools for people to connect digitally that have addiction, substance abuse, these new technologies. It's kind of more what I'm working on. And yeah, really glad to, there's something about being vulnerable that allows you to just connect with people and be honest. And that's just, it's the best connection. So very grateful to be here. Thank you, Daniel, for inviting me on. Appreciate it.
Where are we starting your story? Where does Rohan Dixit put it together story begin?
Yeah.
That sounds like a loaded question, didn't it?
No. I mean, I'm trying to think how far down the rabbit hole to go. Everyone's got a story that, stories within stories. And, but I think for me, what I work on these days is mental health technologies. And I struggled with mental health issues as a kid, a teenager, depression, anxiety. And as you know, that's a lot of that is tied into substance use too. These things all sometimes kind of circle around each other. But yeah, I mean, I was a teenager, kind of like depressed, had a lot of anxiety, and didn't feel good about life, and my mom is, we're an Indian family, and she is into meditation. And so she had a book about mindfulness, like lying around the house, right? I think it was called Freedom from Sadness. Okay, this is like this random book. It's got a flower on it. It looked pretty cheesy, but I opened it up because I was kind of sad. seemed very apropos. And yeah, man, I opened up the book, and the first page on that book was all about why cows don't get sad, which is, I don't know if you've seen this or.
As you said that, I'm like, that sounds familiar. Like I've heard that question before, or that sentence before.
Yeah, it's so the whole concept behind why cows don't get sad is that they're not thinking about the past, they're not stuck imagining future outcomes that might be dangerous or bad for them. They're just in the present moment, right? And that's why a cow doesn't get sad, because it's in the present. It's not stuck in the past or the future. And that was kind of my first introduction to mindfulness and meditation. And I started practicing, and I felt better. Like I genuinely felt better. I didn't feel like cured.
Right.
I didn't feel like 100% like, oh, I'm just a different person, but I felt good enough to like keep going with my life, and it probably saved my life, just learning that technique, because there's something about being able to control where your mind goes that gives you a ton of peace when you learn the skill of doing it. And it just takes practice. But the fact that I knew that I could get there, that if things ever got bad, worse, for example, I could work on this mind training, I could get myself better, I could get myself back on track. That made all the difference. And so that was the beginning of how I put it together, I guess, or, my story, at least. I realized meditation really helped me. I thought something must have changed in my brain. So I dedicated my whole life basically to figuring out what that was, became a neuroscientist, started making all these technologies to help people do it too.
Now, let me go back into, because when you mentioned about your mom giving you this book, it culturally, there is a lot of similarities between the Latino culture and the Indian culture, especially when it comes to taboos and stigma and shame and things that we just don't put out there. Like my mom would say, "You're not depressed. You're just bored. Go do something." And you're like, "But I don't have the energy to go do anything.
Right.
I think it's really interesting that your mom was the one that gave you this book and didn't try to fix you. She was like, here, let me help you fix yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, my parents are super cool. My mom's super cool, and she actually didn't even give me the book. She's such an interesting lady. This is kind of a tangent, but she's been in really bad accidents in her life, car accidents, tons of pain, and just had a tough um, cards dealt to her in certain ways. And she's just such a trooper. She used meditation and mindfulness to help her, but she never pushed that on any of us. I just found the book lying around.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's funny. A lot of times, I think there are a lot of similarities between Indian culture, Latino culture, and also like a lot of immigrant cultures. I feel like people just don't want to talk about mental health and substance use, right? It's just, you know,
Yeah.
keep it in the dark kind of thing.
Well, I think I don't know if I mentioned this. I think I did mention it that day on the Lyfebulb, and we'll get into that in a minute. But I was talking about how in me growing up, and I've stopped really saying in my family because it wasn't my family who thought that way. It was me that thought that way. I just thought we just drank because that's what we did. We don't have problems. Like just because Uncle Paco is taking his shirt off in every party, it was just Uncle Paco. That's what he does. Not realizing that there was an issue. So that when I started drinking so much that I became making a fool of myself at gatherings and parties, I just thought I'm taking over. It's tradition. But not realizing that I actually had an alcohol problem. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does, man. I mean, it's so crazy how these patterns just get handed down from one generation to the next, and that's why I'm so grateful to be having this conversation. It's now we have the ability to like think consciously about how we want to be. What do we want to be? How do we want to help the next generation?
Exactly. So for everybody watching again, this is Put It Together Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Daniel G. Garza, and my guest today is Rohan Dixit. And remember, if you want to ask questions, please join the conversation. But in order to do so, please go into the actual video. It has a black background when you go into Facebook, and that's where you can ask questions. Because if you post them on the regular post, I won't be able to see them. So I go into the conversation, and any question you have on the topics today, just go ahead and join in. Can we start? Can we talk about how we exactly where we met, like Lyfebulb, and how that came up, and what your program is? Because I know a little bit about the program, but I want people to know about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we met at the Lyfebulb Orexo substance use challenge, right? And so basically, Orexo is a big pharmaceutical company that helps people with addiction, and Lyfebulb is a really cool organization that helps patients with different chronic diseases. So everything from diabetes to anxiety, you name it. They're a really great organization, and they basically throw these little contests, these grants, kind of things where they'll find companies that are making solutions that could help people with chronic diseases, and they really focus on patients too. And so a lot of the companies like that you and I were listening to at that event were run by people who either have struggled with substance use or they have family members who they supported through substance use. And so really cool event where people are just sharing and trying to put our heads together and figure out, how can we help? How can we make a difference?
Yeah.
And so yeah, what I work on is a company called Lief Therapeutics. It's basically a little smart patch. You wear it on I'm actually wearing one now. You can't see it. It's under my clothing. But yeah, it's basically a little wearable device that measures your anxiety levels, your stress levels in real time. And then what it does is it can kind of turn on when you're starting to get tense, even before you might recognize it yourself. And it gives you these patterns of vibrations that you learn how to breathe with. And it basically teaches you to meditate, kind of. It's like, we call it like kind of training wheels for meditation. So we basically, yeah, that's our product. And, we use it for people with mental health issues because mindfulness really helps. We use it for substance use. We use it for a lot of different things. And yeah, that's why I was there.
That is so cool. It's kind of like an earthquake detector, like measuring the shakes before it actually happens, kind of send out a message. One of the things that I find really interesting is for a long time, there was this division between science and spirituality, which is like meditation. And for the people that have been following me for a long time, know I'm a Reiki master. I'm an intuitive card reader, so I'm a spiritual coach. So I work with all that, and it's really cool because I also work with pharmaceutical companies for my HIV and my diabetes and stuff. I a long time ago found the middle ground. I guess that part where science and spirituality meet, because for a long time people had them divided. If you were spiritual and you meditated, then you were anti-pharma and you couldn't believe in that. And if you were a scientist, it's like meditation doesn't, like that's woohoo stuff. But I feel like in the last, especially this year, I just got chills. Especially this year, there has been this really beautiful merge between the two. Does that make sense?
I'm a huge fan of that, actually. Yeah, I know we talked about this a little bit just in our conversations before, but I spent a bunch of time with monks, and um, I really see these two things, like the spiritual and the science and the scientific world they're coming together, because ultimately it's, the outer world, the inner world, they all operate on rules that we can observe and then kind of like understand. And I really think that this whole dualism, like, science versus spirituality, that's going to be more and more a thing of the past, and there's kind of a syncretic, like a merger of these two things that's coming, and it's happening now, which is really cool.
Yeah, because I talked about this after my cancer. I was we don't know, you don't know the story, but I was diagnosed with anal cancer back in 2015, and have a stoma that was my surgery was in 2016, and so just a year apart. But as much as chemo and radiation played a part in getting rid of the cancer, um, the void and the loss of me uh, was filled by my meditation and my spirituality and being able to connect. And most of my friends, my close friends, know that a lot of them recorded these 5 minute meditations for me that I would listen to. I knew exactly where on the road when my partner was driving me. I knew where on the trip. It was 5 minutes before I got to the clinic, and I would start listening to them. And that would bring my anxiety down so that when I got into radiation, I would be at just the best balance I possibly could. Yes, I know it didn't always work. There were times when I still panicked, but for I would say 90% of the time, I do give credit to that balance that I had internally, knowing that although this hurt physically, um, mentally I was prepared for it, and I believe that I healed better because of the combination of everything that I had around me. And unfortunately, a lot of folks, and out there, a lot of folks don't believe in the spiritual meditations energy side of it. And I wish we could tell like, yeah, just do it. How did you get involved in all this? I mean, other than a little bit about what you were telling us at the beginning of the story, how did you fall into this gig, this job?
Yeah, I basically, when I was a kid, like I was telling you, I thought I could make a machine that would, and basically use science to help people understand what meditation is and why it's good for you. It's kind of like exactly what we're talking about now, this where you're like trying to shake people like, hey, this is real. And people talk about the placebo effect and things like that. But, you know, the placebo effect is measurable for a reason. It has an effect. Like that's the key word in the placebo effect is effect. There is something happening. And like, why is that? Is becoming more and more clear as we start to understand how the mind and the body are connected. And there's not really a hard line between what we think about as, you know, our inner state, our emotional state, our spiritual state, and our physical body. Like these two things interact with each other. So, uh, yeah, I mean, so you're asking like how I kind of got into this line of work or this gig. I mean, basically, you know, I realized even at like 15 or whatever it was that people wouldn't that there were millions of people like me who needed help, who were depressed, who were anxious, who were unhappy, that this could be a thing that could help a ton of people, help us internally, feel better, feel more peaceful, feel calmer, feel happier, and that I felt like that was worth, it's like that network effect, right? Where if you want to make the world a better place, you could try to like create a new system, or you could run for government or something. You do all kinds of things, but if you help individual people feel better and more at peace, then ultimately that has this crazy network effect where the whole world starts to get better. So I was like, well, I'm going to figure out what happened. I'm going to learn what meditation is. So I became a neuroscientist because the world of the modern, age is science. So I was like, I'll figure out how it works. I'll make a machine that helps people do it. So they don't have to, read these books or go to the Himalayan mountains and like meditate with monks. And that was kind of like how I thought I could help the world.
Can we talk a little bit about, because you go back to when you were 15 years old a couple of times. Um, can you tell us a little about Rohan when he was 15?
Super cool. Super cool.
I, I can see that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, yeah. We wouldn't be having this conversation when you were 15.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I was probably a typical teenager, like um, a little awkward, a little unsure, trying to figure out how the world works and what's going on. um, but yeah, I mean, a lot of the reason that I initially, had started to feel unhappy is that I started to like read the newspaper. I'm old enough, and Daniel, it's good talking to somebody who is of my generation. So I, I can you can empathize. I was reading newspapers to understand what was
Yes.
happening. There were these
For,
little pieces of paper that would come to your delivered to your house every
for
day.
those of you that don't know about newspapers, it's paper, actual paper in your hands. Yeah, and if you read too much, you ended up with black on your fingers.
Newspaper. You can look it up on Wikipedia. But yeah, I mean, I started to learn about, we lived in the suburbs. Everything was pretty good. I just started to learn about, oh, over there, right across the ocean, there's people starving. And, the world's like a really dark place in a lot of ways. And human beings really don't look out for each other oftentimes. And all of that kind of started to spiral into this feeling of just, wow, like this is not a good place to be. And I don't, you know, it's not, the world's just very different than I had imagined it was as a child, where I think maybe your parents sometimes will try to shelter you,
Right.
try to give you the best look at things. But that was kind of the that was kind of the time that I found that book about meditation, and I didn't change anything about the world, but it did make me feel a lot better. And I started to realize that if we feel better, that's actually the first step to making the world a better place. We can't make the world better unless we're okay, and so yeah.
I'm gonna write that one down because I love when people, uh, when I'm coaching people and they finally come to the understanding that it is not their responsibility for other, they're not responsible for other people's happiness. They can only control theirs. And the ripple effect of your own inner light will shine on other people. And that's how you affect other people. But if you're walking around with a burned out bulb, uh, you're never going to shine light on anybody else. And yes, thank you. Thank you. We can go on. That could be a whole different show we can go into. But um, so I'm going to ask this question. We haven't really talked about it that much, but I'm going to ask: did you have? Because we're talking about a little bit about substance and alcohol use. Were there those issues with you growing up?
I mean, I wouldn't say that I had substance use disorder, but I mean, I definitely, if you don't feel good, you look for all kinds of ways to make yourself feel better. And a lot of them were not healthy or maybe even destructive. Um, but, I kind of, because I think at that early age, I found something else that worked. I feel like I didn't go into the darkest places that I might have otherwise, just because I kind of had an escape route, like an escape valve. If things ever got like I couldn't really deal with them, I had a process, I had something I could do. I could sit down, start counting my breath, I could basically turn my attention inwards and figure out, like, what's happening, and let that go a little bit.
And I think that's I'm so impressed and interested in the fact that you were you were taught early on to resolve things for yourself, because we have very similar. Uh, Again, for everybody watching, we only met for like a couple of minutes during this event that we were both at, and then we talked for just a short time while he was driving, and we were getting this together. But my mom was very much about, so you have a problem, how do you want to fix it? And she would allow me to sit there, and of course as a kid also, like, why aren't you helping me? And
Yeah.
but her helping me was, I'm not always going to be around to fix your problems. So let me teach you how to fix your problems, which is something that I do now, like as a boss, when I have a staff or when I'm organizing events. It's like, let me teach you how to fix your problem so that you don't have to come to me all the time. Like I want to teach you, and I think you and I are on that same page. Correct me if I'm wrong. Where it's like, I'm not trying to ask 20 people for the solution. I need to stop and ask myself what the solution is. And if it's not the right one, there will always be somebody who will guide me. But my mom, and I said this, we had the noon show today, and my mom always, she passed away in August, but she would always tell me when I did something wrong, and I knew I did it wrong, and I was going to get in trouble. Before I got in trouble, she would always ask me, like, do you feel comfortable enough to put your head on that pillow and sleep peaceful? And that's all I would do, because I'd be like, no, I was a bad boy today. But now I use that for myself. That's my compass. Talking about meditation and feeling, that's my compass. Have I done everything I can possibly do today to be the best person I possibly could? And that helps my anxiety and my depression, so that then tomorrow I don't wake up thinking about that same thing that I was thinking about today. Does that make sense?
That makes a ton of sense. I mean, for your mom to have taught you that at an early age, that's, I mean, I don't know if I got that lesson. Like, I learned it the first time I heard it. It took a couple tries, more than a few, but I mean, it's lucky to have people like that in your life.
For everybody watching, again, we're halfway through the show. This is put together Conversations podcast, and my guest today is neuroscientist Rohan Dixit, and we're talking a little bit about life, a little bit about his work with Lief Therapeutics, and a little bit of substance abuse and addictions. And can we talk about addictions a little bit? Because I feel like you have some insight on this. I want to go back into like your knowledge, but people used to think that addictions was just alcohol and drugs, and there are, as I've gotten older, because I'll be 50 this December. So for everybody watching, like, yes, I'll be 50. Um, but there is an array, because we're talking about the patch that you're wearing and the anxiety and how it lets you know where you're going. Does that work like across the board for? I guess I'm trying to understand a little more how it works, and maybe you can break it down for us.
Yeah. So basically, what it's doing is it's measuring your your heart rate. There's something in your heart rate called heart rate variability, HRV, and it's a super interesting thing. It's kind of hard to measure it with, like a watch or, things like that. But if you have an EKG, you have a really accurate sensor. You can measure this biomarker, and basically, I was telling you that I was a neuroscientist before this, did neuroscience research, and I don't know if this is something about science or scientists, or just it's a human nature hubris thing, but I always assumed 100% that everything interesting happening about our mind was like in the brain. It was like right here. Because like neuroscientists, we're always studying the brain. We're always looking at all the different brain regions. How do they talk to each other? What grows faster? What's like, you know, it's only focused on just that one part of the human body. But what I started to learn as I started to study the whole system is that actually your heart and your mind are connected. And if you measure certain things about your heart, like this biomarker I'm talking about, you can actually tell how somebody is feeling. You can tell when they're stressed, when they're anxious, when they're depressed. And so basically what I realized with that was, one of the things that you start with meditation is noting, right? You're kind of like just noticing what's happening in your mind. I feel like that's the first step, at least for me, in unraveling when I'm in a darker place. It's like, why am I feeling this way? Let me first notice, like, what are the thoughts going through my head? And it's that process of watching yourself, that feedback loop, that's really important. Like, if you don't have that feedback loop, it's sometimes hard. It's like a fish that's an aquarium. It's like, I don't see any water. Like, where's the water? It's all around you. You can't you're not perceiving your own thoughts sometimes and your own patterns. So what this device helps you do is basically it's measuring some of that for you. It's measuring when you start to get stressed, anxious, for example, and it can turn itself on and give you this little vibration feedback loop to bring you in the moment. Like, oh, hey, what's going on? Like, let me pay attention. Let me think about this for a second. Let me feel into my body, and it teaches you how to breathe in a way that basically improves that measurement of your heart and calms you down. And yeah, I know that at that Lyfebulb event, we were talking about how anxiety is such a huge trigger for substance use, right? Like,
Right.
people describe it as like the biggest trigger, right? And so the question is, when you get a trigger, the whole, like, what does the trigger mean? It's like something happens and then there's an automatic reaction. So the whole thing you need with breaking a trigger in a feedback loop is to have that trigger give you a different choice. So instead of you get that anxiety trigger and you're going to go straight to a bottle, or you're going to go straight to whatever it may be, shopping compulsively, it could be eating, it could be, I mean, there's like, people do all kinds of stuff that's not always in their best interest. For you, it allows you to have that little moment, that little extra space. So the trigger comes in and then you have a chance to breathe, change how you're feeling just a little bit, give yourself a little bit of space, and then you choose what you want to do next. And then that choice is up to you, but it's giving you that little space, which that's how I kind of describe it.
Pretty cool. Because I've talked about this on the show before. I never knew growing up, and it didn't really like have room to grow until my cancer. Because I was, long story short, but for those of you that have been following the show know about this. I started with a hernia surgery back in March of 2015, which then in May they diagnosed my cancer. Then I was in bed for like a year, and then I had my surgery in April of 16, and then I was in bed for another. So I was in bed for like a year and a half, basically, and that um, kind of gave my agoraphobia permission to grow because I didn't have to go anywhere. I didn't have to do anything, and it was like, oh, free space. Let's. We don't have to go anywhere. So when I was finally able to move around on my own, my anxiety had grown so much, kind of like a fungus. It just grew, and I didn't realize it was affecting me. Uh, that triggered a lot of things for me. Like I don't have a need to drink or do drugs anymore. Um, but it definitely triggered other. That's why I started about addictions earlier. It triggered a food uh, addiction. I became a stress eater, and a workaholic. So I wanted to work all the time. And it was just my way to not slow down. As long as I didn't slow down and stop, I didn't have time to think. And if I didn't have to think, I wouldn't get anxious. But then my body would get so exhausted that it broke down that all I could do was think, and then it would get me there. So man, that patch would have been. Where were you, Rohan, almost a year ago when I needed you? Um, does that is that kind of like what you're talking about, like those triggers, those anxieties, those panic attacks?
That makes so much sense, and I think that's how I've gone through similar situations in dealing with my own anxiety and not knowing, throwing yourself into doing something. I feel like stress eating and then even just workaholism, right? Especially the last, we were talking about at the beginning of the show, the pandemic and how that's added a bunch of stress to people's lives. I think that to some degree, people are, I mean, stress eating is like a joke, and like working really hard is like a good thing, you know. But yeah, ultimately, you know, looking in yourself and facing the shit that we don't want to deal with, that is hard and is not going to be fun and is actually going to be more difficult in the short term when we try to take it on and like pull the pieces apart. That is so important, but that's not like, that's not on TV. That's not going to sell more, whatever, right? That's not like how the whole system works. But it is how we heal ourselves. And yeah, I mean, I'm wondering, like, what do you do, Daniel, when you're in a space now where you might be feeling really stressed, really anxious? What are the couple things that like, help you where you're at now?
So, okay, just to give a little disclaimer, like I was finally diagnosed with agoraphobia probably about 2 years ago. And this is because I had a doctor's appointment. I'm part of an HIV and addiction study where they are studying people who did drugs for more than 10 years and are HIV positive. So they're doing a study on us. So anyway, I was at my boyfriend's house where I am right now, and the clinic is probably like 10 minutes away, 15 minutes away. So I was having this attack, I was having a panic attack. And usually how they start for me is if I need to leave like in 5 minutes and I already know that I have to leave, it's the perfect time to clean the bathroom, or it's the best time to clean out the refrigerator. And oh shoot, I need to find that shirt that I'm going to wear next week. Now I need to find it right now. And then what that does is, oh, I'm running late for the appointment now. Oh, I'm already late. Oh, I'm gonna get stuck in traffic. I'll just cancel. Oh, I can't go anywhere. But if I really have to go, it's just sweat, just profusely sweating, until I get in my car. Once I'm in my car, I'm okay. But it's this moment of it. And when I got to the clinic, the nurse took my pressure and she was like, "What is wrong with you?" So I was telling her, I'm like, "Oh my God, it's this thing that happens." And I'm like, "I don't know what it is." Like, I get a little bit anxious. And she's like, she's a physician assistant. And she's like, you have agoraphobia. Like, it's just like your classic case. I'm like, your mama, whatever that is. And I'd never heard the term before. And I came home, obviously, and looked it up. And I was like, oh, shoot. So when I looked up the symptoms and saw the people's videos, I realized that's what it was. So based on what I read, the tool that works best for me is I have my 5 friends who knows what's going on with me, what's happening, and they're my 911 emergencies. So I will start with Christian, my boyfriend, and 911. If he doesn't answer, then I go to the next person on the list, which is our friend Martha, 911. If she doesn't answer, it's my friend Wayne. If not him, then my friend Rebecca. If not her, then my friend Maddie. So there's 5 people, and they know, and they know where they are on the list. So the person at the bottom of the list knows that if
Things have gone wrong.
Yeah, if I got to her, that means that I am like in full panic mode and nobody else is answering. And it's usually, it's like they know, I just need you for like 5 minutes to get me out the door and in my car. Once I'm in my car, I'm fine. But that was the best thing that I did. The other is I don't give myself a lot of time to prep in the morning. So like I'll prep my clothes the night before, I'll prep my bag for whatever I need, so that in the morning, all I have time for is to shower, change, grab my coffee, and run out the door. Because if I sit on the couch long enough, it gives my brain time to think like, oh, so we're not going anywhere. Oh, cool. Let's just relax. And then when I'm like, no, we have to go somewhere, my brain is like, hell no, dude, we're not going anywhere. Like it's like a 2-year-old child in my head that's like, we're not going anywhere. I don't want to go. And in fact, right now thinking about it, I'm getting my hands are getting clammy.
It's just so crazy how we can put ourselves into that state.
Yeah. As I'm talking, I'm going, holy shit, my hands are getting clammy. If y'all could touch my hands, I'm like, I'm going into panic, and I'm not going anywhere tonight, which is really crazy. But just talking about it is getting me there.
This is a good opportunity, though. Do you want to try like a little breathing exercise?
Sure.
I got to send you one of these leaves so you can like check it out, and try it. But yeah, you can kind
By
of.
the way, what?
I'm wearing one right now. You see, like, right around where we started, I'm in the yellow zone here. It's a little stressful. It's not too bad, but now I'm in a good space. Now that we kind of like eased into this, and I feel less anxious, and it's nice.
This is the first time that my show has been registered on something like that. This is so awesome. So, by the way, I want to announce because people are watching the show. My friend Tony Gala, who also has his own live stream in Spanish, Lenguas Largas. He's like, great topic. Does your guest speak Spanish? Because he would be great for his show. So,
Un poquito, like not very
poquito.
well.
We're gonna have to coordinate and have you on his show and maybe translate for you.
Yeah, let's do it.
Especially because his show is in Spanish and a lot of Latinos that watch his show would be very interested in it, something like this. But I would love to experiment with your patch and see how it does. We'll have to talk about that after the show. Okay, so whatever, I'm all in. This is my space right here. I'm all into this.
We're in it. Yeah, totally. Do you want to do it really quick, like just like one breath or two breaths?
Yeah, I'm all yours. Let's do it.
Okay, yeah. So basically, all right, you can see like here's my heart rate, right? But what you can kind of do is basically you can feel, just kind of try to find your pulse, right? Try to find your pulse on your wrist. And what you're going to do is you're going to take in a pretty short inhale and then hold it for just a second. And then you're going to let it out. All the way out. And you might notice your heart rate actually slows down a little on that exhale. Now I take another short in and just hold it. And let it all out. And you feel that heart rate slowing down. And just one more. Hold it. And exhale. And you can kind of see here with my data, what was happening with my heart is that it's turning into this wave pattern. My heart rate's actually going up and down like a wave when we're breathing in and out in that way. And what it does is it makes this biomarker of your stress get a lot better, and it makes you feel more relaxed. So yeah, that was a little downtime breath. That's what we call.
Okay, so I am too relaxed now. Rohan, this is all yours for the last 15 minutes. I'm done.
Got it.
We're checking out.
Ask you questions.
Yeah. Actually, we are down to the last 15 minutes. For everybody watching, this is Put Together Conversations, and I'm your host, Daniel G. Garza, with my guest, neuroscientist Rohan Dixit. Does it make you feel like, are you cool with that title, neuroscientist? Was it hard work getting there?
I am not a neuroscientist anymore. I don't do any neuroscience research, so I'm in a former life. It sounds good though.
It doesn't. Okay,
it does sound good, right?
Because what would be if you had? We were talking about this in the earlier episode. What is your? How do you define yourself now?
Yeah, I'm a human being. I try my best to be kind, to myself, to other people, trying to make the world a better place. I run a business, a small business where we make these medical devices for people with mental health issues and people who just want to feel better. Yeah.
You're so chill. I just totally dig you. You're so chill. This is about the time also where I like to ask my guest to offer some words of wisdom to my listeners and watchers. So if you're listening to this on any of the audio pages or here on Facebook, Rohan Dixit, what words of wisdom would you like to share?
Something that's helped me is if you can take care of yourself, then that's the first step to being able to take care of other people. So I know a lot of us out there, sometimes extend ourselves too much, or we're too concerned with what's happening outside of us and other people and making sure everybody's okay. But yeah, I mean, those are words of wisdom for me in my own life, just making sure that I'm caring about myself as much as I care about, my job or my family and friends, and yeah.
So how do you take care of yourself when you get stressed?
Yeah, so I do that type of breathing actually a lot. So I'll do it. I'll do like one or two or three of those breaths now, uh, in a lot of different like weird circumstances too. That like, you wouldn't necessarily, not just only anxiety, but like if I want to like go out for a run, I can kind of like, but I'm feeling sort of lazy. I can use that to kind of put myself into a state where I'm just like, there's less like resistance to going out. I can just get out there and go do it. Uh, yeah. What else do I do? I adopted a puppy during the quarantine, so he's over there just passed out. So yeah, he's a husky, so he loves to run around and he has crazy energy. So he keeps me on my toes. We go hiking and stuff like that. I love to get out into nature. Um, yeah, yeah. What else do I do? Uh, I meditate. I hike with the dog. That's pretty much it.
It's pretty cool. And just and we talked about this on the show before that meditation, although there is the final, I guess the middle ground for everybody who meditates is about going inside of you and just aligning yourself and being, which is the breathing, being in tune with your breathing. But I've told people on the show, it's like not everybody has the energy to sit quietly for a long time. And I get lost editing videos. Like if I sit down and edit a video, I am so into myself and so in the moment that I'm like, that is the perfect space for me. I tell my boyfriend the perfect time to ask me for anything is when I'm editing a video because I am so calm and relaxed, like I'm there. Some people like to run, some people can't sit. I know friends who just sit there and then do a whole hour of meditation. My brain doesn't allow me to do that. Um, do you agree with that? That everybody should find their perfect meditation practice?
Yeah, I mean, we're all very different, and what would help one person get into a state where they're paying attention to themselves is different from other people. This is something that I think a lot of people think about and talk about, but it's not as clear as it could be, which is the difference between flow and the flow state and what meditation, and there's like dozens of different types of meditation, right? Which and they're like sometimes pretty different from each other, but and what meditation is. So there's like the flow state, there's meditation. And the flow state is, I think, what you're talking about when you're editing videos, right? You're in this perfect equilibrium of like um, using. It's a challenging task, but it's within but you're good at it, and you can make it happen, and you're in the flow, right? And so what that allows you to do is you're not thinking other thoughts, like you're not anxious about the future, you're not like really sad about something that happened in the past. You're just in that moment, like engaging with this thing in the present moment. And then different types of meditation, it's a little different than that because there's not this external object necessarily. The object of your attention is going back on yourself, and that's what's so hard, because especially for people that have a ton of energy, right? Like energy, having a lot of energy is really just having a lot of you're able to generate thoughts really quickly, and like you're moving around a lot internally. And so the whole process of meditation and mindfulness is, now, I found this like when I eventually left the laboratory and I went to go live with Himalayan monks and like record their brainwaves in the mountains. And I lived out there for like a year. And at the end of that, I was in a cave in Ladakh, which is in the desert Himalayas, way, way up near Tibet. And I was meditating alone in this cave. And, at the first 2, 3, 4 days, it was, pretty normal. And then after that, I started to get into really different states. And I realized that I had actually never meditated before. I thought I had for years, but what I finally perceived when I really, really got into myself was that right below my layer of conscious thoughts, there are all these little other thoughts happening. And as I started to dissolve that layer, and that just takes really time and space, and you kind of have to be alone for a while in order for it to even happen, is the most incredible feeling of happiness and bliss and just like I can't even describe it, Dan. Honestly, it changed my whole life. And I stayed in those mountains for like another week or so, and then I was like, oh, I'm good. Like I'm good for life. I got on a plane. I came back to America, and I stopped meditating. and, so, and that feeling lasted like, oh, I don't know, another month, two, maybe three, and then started to dissipate again. But I think what it taught me was that the difference between flow and certain types of meditation is that you have to, and actually these are kind of similar. They're similar actually in this way, that you have to practice. You have to practice what you're doing. Like if you get into that state when you're editing videos, then you have to do that more and deepen into that practice. And if you're meditating, you've just got to put in the time. There's like no 5-minute abs for figuring your heart and mind and soul out. Like you just, sometimes it takes like a lot of effort at the beginning to get going.
There's I was talking about the cancer. Right before my ostomy surgery in April, I had to go to the hospital in emergency, and I died. Christian, they had to bring me back 3 times, and excuse me. Oh, by the way, Father Robert out of Florida is watching us. Saying good evening. Father Robert in Florida watches. He's such a big supporter and a fan. I think of the shows. And I never feel like my show is complete until Father Robert makes a comment on the thread. Yes, so, but they had to bring me back 3 times while I was in the hospital, and I spent a lot of time alone. And for those of you that think, oh my God, how can you possibly meditate in the hospital? There is this consistency of the machines, of the pressure on one machine, the beeping of another machine, and it's constant. It is the same sound 24 hours a day. And when you're laying there by yourself sometimes, and all you have is this, your breathing starts to mimic it. And when you have that beep, beep, your thoughts start to flow in that. And I know it's not the same, but it's when I hear people talking about going away, I'm like, that's what I was doing without even knowing what I was doing. But I would lay there in the hospital alone and hear the of the machine, the beep, and it would take me somewhere. And in that somewhere, my body was okay, and I could manifest what I wanted to become and how I wanted my body to heal. And despite not being able to get out of bed, because my pressure was, I lost a lot of blood and I wasn't allowed to get out of bed. So nurses had to come and change me and then feed me. But despite all that, I found such a happiness in the moment that I was. So much so that I was giving the nurses card readings when they were coming to change me. I was so in that zone, and they were like, how is it that despite what's going on, you are there? And I didn't know how to explain to them until you said it just now. It was all that was happening around me that allowed me, maybe because I trusted the machines were keeping me alive, maybe because I trusted that somebody would come in and something would have rhythm, or that allowed me to just go away and not be in the sickness, but in the health of my body. Does that make sense? Like instead of focusing on all the unhealthy things, I was focusing on the strengths of my body and going, okay, this part of my body is strong enough to heal the rest. So let's go for it, guys. And like, knock on wood, like here I am 4 years later, still kicking butt. So, and that's a butt joke because it was anal cancer. So, there you go. Pun intended. But does that make sense?
That does. It does make sense. But what do you think about, because there's that difference, right? Where sometimes like in that hospital bed, you were kind of alone in a way, right? Alone with your thoughts. But then, when you need help now, and like I do this too, you reach out to friends. So what's that balance to you between being alone for self-growth versus like having other people to help you?
Well, the thing that taught me about that was that And being so self-reliant, being taught, going back to the conversation about my mom, having been taught very early on that you can do this on your own, like you can. We don't have to always do everything on our own. There are people there to help us out. But when nobody else is around, um, I go to other people for meditation. So I found Michael Seeley. I talk about him a lot. Michael Seeley is one of my favorite uh, guides. He's on YouTube and he's awesome. Plus, he has this really awesome British accent, which is like, okay, cool. So I have found a way, even if I can't get to my phone or I'm in the car, I'm a big believer of the 3 deep breaths because I do that with my clients before we start every session. It's like 3 deep breaths, but ours is a little different. I'll talk to you about that after the show. But um, I don't want to cry because it makes me think about that. But when I need to center myself and ground myself and get into that meditation moment, and at least even if I just have 5 minutes, I think about and this is why I was kind of right now like, oh, dude, like you made me make a connection. I think about shh. And if for anybody who's been in the hospital, you know what I'm talking about. It's that little machine's like, shh, and there's always a beep in the background. There's always a beep in the background, and I'll think about that. I'll think about how I was using, again, branding other conversations, using science and spirituality to make me feel better. And when I need to, especially after my mom died, um, it was the first time in like 13 years that I thought about drinking for real. Like not just like, oh, let's go celebrate. Like I really wanted to go and get drunk. Um, and I was like, you can't go there. Like you. So I went into that ding moment, and it brought me back to like, dude, look how much you've done for yourself. Just do it. So and now anytime, um, I don't think I'm a mom when I go through tough times because she was tough enough with me to make me resilient, but she always celebrated my successes. So when I'm successful in something, I have the urge to want to talk to her. And it gets me to that anxious moment that I can't. So whether I'm driving or at home, I think about the ding moments, and that brings me back down. Does that make sense? Did I ramble too much? I hope I didn't ramble too
That makes
much.
sense. Daniel, thank you.
Um,
Yeah, we are often alone, but it's like those moments and the people in our lives that help us, even when they're not physically there. It can make all the difference, you know.
yeah, there's for everybody watching, you guys have heard all these stories. So, but we're coming down to the end of the show. I feel like this hour went by well. Please come back. I want to hear more about your cave trips and the monks, and like I feel like we didn't tap into so much more conversation that we could have. Uh, but I want to leave the door open for you to come back anytime you want and share some of these
I would
stories.
love to. I would love to. That would be amazing.
Plus, you were talking about that you might want to launch your own podcast and you might want to do your own thing. So I congratulate you and I encourage you to do it. I think you have such a good vibe and you're easy to talk to. If you have guests, they would love to sit with you. They would be it would be amazing. So let us know if that happens.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna ask for your advice because as we were talking about microphones and stuff, there's so much that goes into all this. Yeah, super appreciate that.
So before we go, any last thoughts you want to leave our audiences? And where can they find you if they want to get in touch with you and find out more about Lief Therapeutics?
Yeah, so you can get in touch with me on our website. It's getlief, GETLIEF.com. Yeah, reach out there. I'm always available. If you actually, based on some of the grants that we won from contests like where we met, we're actually offering people who are on Medi-Cal or Medicaid and outside of California free access to the Leaf. So if that's somebody that you know or you're interested in yourself um, using using our product to learn how to use mindfulness and help yourself, yeah, reach out on the website. We'll get in touch with you and help you out.
Cool. We're going to talk more after the show's over. So for everybody watching, you have been joining us for Put It Together Conversations podcast. I am your host, Daniel G. Garza. My guest today has been the amazing Rohan Dixit. I love guests that can make me think, and because I usually, you know what I mean. It's like it's my show. You're coming into my space, but when you turn the tables on me, I'm like, how dare you? First of all, and then second, I'm like, oh wow, this is pretty cool. For those of you listening, remember you can catch this here on Facebook. It stays on. Soon we will be posting all of this on YouTube, so you guys can go check them out on YouTube. But the podcast runs on all of the audio sites, so make sure you go check it out. I want to thank again my director, Mr. Christian Paul Ramirez, my producers, Mr. Kevin Moyers from Abnormal Entertainment, and Mr. Jose Reyes from Hubris Management. I want to thank my agent, Ms. Jennifer Sims at RPM Talent. I want to thank all of them for all their help and support in putting this show together. If you want more information to be on the show, or if you want to nominate somebody, you can email us at danielggarza@littlemexicanproductions.com. That's LILMESICAN productions.com, all one word. Or right here on Facebook. If you are watching us on Facebook, just go to the messenger, drop me a line, and I will connect with you. We welcome everybody. The idea of Put It Together Conversations podcast is we want to inspire folks and motivate them to go after their own dreams and goals by sharing our stories of where we came from, where we are now, and what the journey was like. So if you have a journey, you have a story. If you have a story, come and share it here on Put It Together Conversations. For now, I want to thank again Rohan for being on the show. Thank you so much, sir. Thank all of you for joining us. We will see you next week, and I don't have my calendar in front of me, but hold on, I will tell you who will be on the show next week. Next week, again, we're going to have the two shows, the noon show and the Dorian Capozzi comic will be on our noon show, and Pritesh Shah, who has been, I guess, on my shows before, stand-up comic and producer, will be coming on to talk about his project. So join us next week for those two shows. Remember, we are here live Saturdays at noon and 5:00 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So set your timer and grab a cup of coffee and come join us. For now, again, I want to thank Rohan for joining us. Thanking all of you. This is Daniel G. Garza saying, hey, put it together.